Felix Pinard, photographer of early Sarasota and family. This talk will also include a second pioneer, George A. Kaysen, Sarasota merchant. Note, most of the photographs in this segment were taken by Felix Pinard and are now part of the Pinard collection in the Florida Archives. What is today Sarasota County was part of Manatee County from 1855 to 1921, so it seems appropriate to show an early map of Manatee County. In 1855, Hamlin Snell, a stepbrother of Bill Whitaker, as Florida Senate President, helped pass the bill to create Manatee County from the southern portion of Hillsborough County. You can see that Manatee County stretched from the Hillsborough County line to the Caloosahatchee River near Fort Myers and from the Gulf of Mexico to Lake Okeechobee. It was sparsely populated, but pioneers were starting to settle on both sides of the Manatee River by 1855. After the Civil War, more pioneers started settling in the other areas of the county like Myakka, Osprey, and Venice. In 1869, the schooner Morning Light from Mobile, Alabama, landed on the south shore of Nona Bay in the Venice area, and 4 families got off to try their luck at homesteading in this part of Florida. They were fleeing the post-war Reconstruction in the South. The Chandler-Young family settled at the mouth of Philippi Creek. The William Brunson family settled in the Immokalee area just north of Philippi Creek. The Stephen Drew family and the George Grayson family went south and homesteaded near today's Venice Airport. For this presentation, we are interested in the Stephen Drew family, which consisted of Stephen, his wife Martha, née Roberts, and 3 daughters. In 1871, 2 years after the Drew family landed, Martha Drew's younger brother, Robert Rickford Roberts, settled on land bounded by the Gulf of Mexico to the west, Roberts Bay to the east, Casey's Pass to the north, and the Drews' homestead to the south. He planted a variety of crops, including sugarcane, pineapples, corn, vegetables, tobacco, and potatoes. In his 3rd year, 1873, Robert started living on the land and brought his widowed sister Martha and her 2 daughters, Carrie and Helen, to live with him. I assume Stephen Drew died on his homestead and that Martha continued the homestead until moving in with her brother. I'm not sure if one of the daughters died or moved away. As you may have guessed, Roberts Bay in the Venice area was named after Robert Rickford Roberts. This is a photograph taken by Felix Pinard of the Roberts homestead circa 1883. Pineapple plants are in the foreground. It looks like bananas and fruit trees in the background. Robert Roberts applied for a homestead claim for his 121 acres in spring of 1874 at Gainesville, and on Christmas Eve 1879 he published his final proof notice in the Tampa Guardian. He listed his witnesses as John Green Webb and Levi Jonathan Knight. A homestead patent was issued in August of 1882. The screen shows a sample ad for a final homestead proof notice printed in the Manatee River Journal. By summer of 1884, Robert Roberts had sold 107 acres out of his 121-acre homestead, 10 acres to his niece Carolyn R. Mason, whose husband Jim was a shipbuilder, 24 acres to Captain Thomas Gordon Edmondson, who had married Louise Anstey Whitaker, daughter of William and Mary Jane Whitaker 8 years prior, and 73 acres to Frank Heigl Sr., who paid $2,500. According to Venice, Journey from Horse and Chase by Janet Snyder Matthews, it was noted that in 1884, while shipping lumber for Frank Heigl, a Captain Topliff noticed Robert's orange trees and sugarcane near Casey's Pass and Jim Mason in the process of building a schooner. The Venice area was known as Horse and Chase early in Manatee County's history because the trees and vegetation marking the entrance to Casey's Pass were in the shape of a horse and wagon. This map shows the Roberts homestead and the area Frank Heigl Sr. bought from R.R. Roberts. Heigl owned the light green area while Roberts held on to lands to the south of Roberts Bay. The only picture I found of Felix Pinard, he appears to be in his early to mid-20s, but when he arrived to the area he was about 38. According to Wikitree, Felix Pinard was born in Saint Domingo, Haiti in 1845. He was a photographer by trade and arrived in Manatee County about 1883. He moved throughout the area taking pictures of local people and landscapes, including the Roberts homestead. Felix's pictures today offer an insight into what pioneer life was like in Manatee County. During the next 2+ years, Felix met and wooed Helen Drew, who was 24 in 1883. She was born in Alabama in 1859. After their marriage, they purchased a homestead in the Sarasota area just south of today's Ringling Boulevard and bordering on today's Gulfstream Avenue. It was a rustic wooden house overlooking the bay. This area is now known as the Pinard Midden area. Martha Drew lived with her daughter's family. The article, Sarasota Bay Mound, a Safety Harbor Period Burial Mound, by George Luer in the Florida Anthropologist for March through June 2005, identified that the Felix Pinard homestead was on an Indian mound and named it the Pinard Midden. The Manatee County Voter Registry of 1883 showed that Robert Rickford Roberts had moved away from the Sarasota voting district, which his homestead was in. The Manatee County General Directory shows that he was a farmer around Bradentown on or before 1897. Here are 3 pictures of the Pinard home taken by Felix. Helen Pinard and the Pinard children were among the favorite photographic subjects of Felix Pinard. Here you see Helen and her infant son Francis near a well. The next photo shows Francis about age 2 or 3 on his porch. These 3 photos show the Pinard children, Francis and Josephine, growing up. These are 3 more images of the Pinard children growing up. At some point, Francis wanted to be called Frank. As time went on, there were other photographers in the area, most from Tampa, and it was harder for Felix to make a decent living. Felix had to travel to Bradentown, Venice, Sarasota, and Tampa to promote his business. It appears he was away from his family very often. Felix had an ad in the Manatee River Journal from February 1889 through December 1889, advertising that he had his gallery in the house of W.B. Tresca and that he was available from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wednesday through Saturday. He would take sittings in his gallery or make enlargements from photographs or negatives in crayon, oil colors, or India ink. On his off days, he would visit other areas with his gallery, such as the Sarasota and Venice areas, in June 1889 to get business. Then off to Tampa, returning in October on a visit to his family. In December 1889, he moved into an office next to the Manatee River Journal and immediately installed skylights in the building and continually made improvements. He moved out a year later. In the meantime, Mrs. Martha Drew and her daughter, Mrs. Helen Pinard, attended the newly organized Methodist Episcopal Church South in Sarasota. They are noted as two of the 12 charter members of the church when it was organized in 1891. Reverend W.B. Tresca was the part-time preacher for the church. Here's a picture of the church at 5 Points at the corner of Pineapple Avenue and Main Street about 1900. Based on the records for Rosemary Cemetery, Felix Pinard died in 1903, and Martha Drew, his mother-in-law, died in 1896. Both were buried in Rosemary Cemetery. A memorial of Felix Pinard's photographic work was displayed on Main Street at the art shop in June 1922. His son Frank provided the plates. The photographs were from 1884 through 1908. The one date, 1908, may indicate he died after 1903. Several of these photographs can be viewed and retrieved from the Florida archives, and others are stored at the Sarasota County Historical Resources Department. Helen Pinard did her part raising their 2 children, but found time to help others. A February 1906 report of the county commissioners showed that the county board paid $15 to Dr. Halton for medical services to Mrs. Joyner and $15 to Mrs. Pinard for nursing Mrs. Joyner. During March 1910, Mrs. Pinard was allowed the widow's exemption of $200 on her taxes. Helen died in 1927 and was buried next to her husband in Rosemary Cemetery. The children grew up. There was very little information about the children until they were young adults. One mention from the Venice column described Josephine as one of Sarasota's charming young ladies. She was listed as an attendee on an excursion in December 1910, along with her brother and others her age. A launch party of young people made the trip to Uncle Ben Stickney's on Sarasota Key Sunday afternoon in the launch Sunshine, captained by Frank Pinard. Those who enjoyed the launch ride were Miss Keller, Miss Myers, Miss Hoffman, Miss McEwen, and Miss Pinard. Mr. Oliver Blackburn, Mr. Hancock, Mr. Iron Ross, Mr. Irvin Edwards, and Mr. Charlie Bethea. It seems like Miss Pinard and Mr. Edwards might have been a couple on this trip. Josephine Pinard. In January 1911, Josephine went in with Miss Grace Biorseth and rented a room in the back of Mr. Clark's store on Main Street where they made dresses. A month later, she was married to Irvin Edwards at the Methodist parsonage. Irvin Edwards was the brother of A.B. Edwards and was associated with the A.B. Edwards and Company business. After the wedding, they rented rooms at the home of Mrs. C.M. Jefferson. Mr. and Mrs. Irving Edwards moved into a house on Orange Avenue at the end of April. And in August, Irving was reported as having cleared a lot east of Mrs. Pinard's cottage in preparation to building a 5-room home. Just in time, too, because on September 21st, a 9.5-pound son was born to them. Francis Frank T. Pinard, born April 27, 1887. Frank Pinard was a boat captain of the Sunshine. He captained several pleasure trips to Ben Stickney's place on Siesta Key, where the passengers could picnic and walk over to the Gulf Beach. This location was a favorite for taking groups. Mrs. Carrie Abbey brought several groups here until the death of Uncle Ben Stickney. Frank was also involved with politics, writing an editorial in the Sarasota Times about Sarasota holding a white primary election. Frank Pinard had many jobs and wore many hats. With his launch Sunshine, he captained fishermen of places like the Grouper Banks. He was a house painter and decorator, forming Pinard and Rainey Painting and Decorating in 1921. He started a business by himself in January 1922 as Frank Pinard House Painting, and in September 1922 joined with Irwin Bjorseth in another painting and decorating company. As mentioned earlier, in June of 1922, Frank Pinard put a collection of his dad's photographs in the art shop. In this section, I will show examples of Felix Pinard's photographs and explain the significance of the person or building. This is only a subset of photos you will find on the website. Carrie Drew Mason is the older sister of Helen Pinard and the daughter of Martha Roberts Drew. She and her husband bought a small section of land, 10 acres, from her uncle Robert R. Roberts and started a shipbuilding business. One of the pictures shows Carrie while the other is of her 3 sons. Two important photos show Lewis Colson, an original surveyor of the town of Sarasota and a leader in the black community. John Hamilton Gillespie was sent by his father, Sir John Gillespie, to manage the Florida Mortgage and Investment Company interests. J. Hamilton Gillespie was a town mayor for many years and contributed greatly in the building of Sarasota. Joe and Rose Vincent's children, circa 1884. Joe and Rose leased and managed the Sarasota House, the primary boarding house in Sarasota from 1886 to 1899, when Rose bought it outright. They sold it to J.H. Lord in 1903. A tragic occurrence happened there in 1902, which led to the incorporation of the town of Sarasota. Leon and Lulu Anderson Hodges family. Leon Hodges was the sheriff of Sarasota for many years. Lulu was the daughter of Joseph Calvin Anderson, who was charged with being a leader in the Sarasota Vigilantes and implicated in the killing of Charles Abbey. Pictures of the DeSoto Hotel taken by Felix Pinard. It was built by the Florida Mortgage and Investment Company. J. Hamilton Gillespie oversaw the building of the hotel. One trick to guess how old the picture was is to look at the mulberry tree on the right side of the front of the hotel and see how tall it's gotten. Just above the 3rd level was a water tank, red arrow, which fed the entire hotel. Water was pumped up from a fountain on the intersection of Main Street and Palm Avenue. Also, in the top left picture is the company store and the company wharf. The company store was bought by George A. Kaysen and later by Harry Heigl. Dr. Jack Halton set up an office there when he first moved to Sarasota. In the same picture you can see to the right of the hotel a house which is thought to be Gillespie's house. More pictures involving the DeSoto Hotel. The guests would show off their fishing catches, especially the tarpon. Chickens in the early days would roam free range, as would hogs and cattle. The 3rd picture shows the hotel garden. At one time, the DeSoto had a tennis court. The original DeSoto hotel managers were Annie and Alfred Jones. They opened the hotel only during the winter, and when their lease was to expire, they had built the Palms Hotel at Indian Beach to house their annual guests. The second picture was at the corner of Palm Avenue and Lower Main Street. From a livery stable, this building was turned into a hotel, the Exclamation Point Inn. In this picture, Sarasota was hosting a regional Baptist convention. Some of the Sarasota Bay scenes. The upper left, DeSoto Hotel, the FMIC dock, the Oyster Shack, the company store, and Lower Main Street. The upper right shows the original Gulfstream Avenue, which was no more than a sandy road. The lower left picture shows the fishing boat of Captain Lewis Roberts. The fishing industry supplied jobs during fishing season. The lower right shows boats in Sarasota Bay. This is a photo of the young Sarasota community looking up Lower Main Street from Palm Avenue. The shot was taken from the fourth story of the DeSoto Hotel. There are clear images of this shot, but this was what is saved in the Florida archives. The buildings from Palm are the Whitaker Smith Livery, Dr. Robert Wallace Home and Clinic, the Iverson Home, later the home of the Sarasota Times, and the two Grable buildings. The first Grable building was the home of Susanna Bartholomew and her children. The second was a common house where church services, dances, and voting took place. The two photos on top are the bayfront home of J.L. Iverson. After building the in-town home on Lower Main Street, he moved away from Sarasota but kept his properties. For many years he lived in Tampa. He replaced his wooden Main Street building with a concrete block building that withstood a major fire and still stands today. He also built a second concrete block building where the Wallace home stood. The lower picture is of the Richard Jeffcott home on the bayfront. Richard Jeffcott was killed in the summer of 1902 at the Sarasota house by Charles Vincent. His death led to the incorporation of the town of Sarasota. These pictures are stereo images of the Pinard property. You would use a stereoscope with these pictures to see a 3D image. End of the Felix Pinard and family presentation.